what do you know? Back in the Dodge, I just don't caravan, and I've got a nice little loaf of bread for you. Today's quote is short and sweet, and it comes from a guy by the name of Isaac Newton. And he says the following: I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. Isn't that funny? He can predict the motion of celestial bodies, but when it comes down to human craziness, Mr. Newton's got no clue. I can't help but think that maybe Newton was on the spectrum. One of these like super smart mathematical wizards who has absolutely no emotional intelligence and no social intelligence. I can just imagine him in his study, poring over his work, making all these complex calculations, and maybe, his wife comes in or something and gives him a hard time, and just him going, man, I can calculate the motion of celestial bodies, but fucked if I know what she's talking about. I'm not being sexist. It's not just the wives. It's just the example that came to mind because, of course, I am a husband and a father and a male. But we all know guys are crazy too. It's not just women. So don't get your back up. I'm not being prejudiced. It's just a joke, just an example. Could have just as easily been a guy who came in and said something stupid to Newton and made him think this, right? The idea is just that you can't predict people. People are so amazing, so fascinating. And I know I'm talking about people like I'm not a person. I am a person. I'm fascinating too. I'm a weirdo too. Don't worry. I'm just talking about people in general because it's something that I've long been interested in. When I tried to summarize my interests, my hobbies, it's kind of difficult because I like so many different things. I like psychology and philosophy and spirituality, history, sociology, you name it, and I'm into it. As long as it relates to human beings. As long as it has to do with the human animal. I've always been interested in learning what makes people tick. Why people do what they do. Why they say what they say, and why those things very rarely line up. So I get it, Isaac. I've been at it for a while, and I still don't understand people. But I understand the mechanisms that make people tick. Maybe Mr. Newton would have been better off studying psychology. But of course, psychology didn't exist back in his day. So I guess math was a good choice for him. So my takeaway from this is quite simple. It's easier to predict the movement of distant stars than it is to predict the movement of a human being's soul. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it's not easy. Distant stars behave in predictable ways. Once you understand the pattern, you can predict its movements. The pattern can be described as a mathematical equation. Unfortunately for us, the human animal doesn't work along such limited and finite lines. The human animal is motivated by patterns as well. But these patterns are so complex and so obscure to the outside observer that they could never be put into a simple formula, nor even a complex formula. So next time you're dealing with someone who is, let's say, challenging, or next time you're dealing with someone who confuses you, maybe you can't relate to them, you can't see eye to eye, or they just have such different values that you can't even begin to relate. Well, next time this happens to you, I hope you'll remember this quote. And I hope you'll remember poor Isaac Newton hiding out in his study, trying to avoid the people in his life because, God damn it, you can't predict them. Better to hang out in the stars and with the planets and the moons. Way easier. Less of a headache, anyway. Well, will you look at that? I've run out of things to say. It's a miracle. I never thought I would shut up. I think I'm going to drive the rest of the way in silence, my friends. Hope you don't mind. Thanks for joining me on this little adventure, and don't forget to live well.